TvGrace presents the inexpressible words of God, the gospel of grace, on the lips of Jesus Christ man. Abba, Father.
The best day to all, and everyone watching via internet that's watching, we love you very much. And we have a marvelous word for you today. So I invite you to take notes, take your pads out, because we have a precious topic. As always, God gives us a teaching that makes us think and search well the Word of God. Today I was reading the book of Daniel. I read several chapters, and I was reading how that statue that was risen up with a gold head, it says that God cut a stone, Son of Man, and that stone that the Son of Man brought managed to destroy the statue. And that stone is this ministry, which is going to tear down that foundation, because that foundation was put together with steel and clay. But the foundation has to have solidity, and solidity is in grace. Now is when I understood the importance of that teaching he gave me, how important it is, because that's what established this ministry. And it was 3 chapters. I'm going to invite you to consider them again, to review them in Romans chapter 6, what the Lord taught me in that vision I had. These teachings constitute what is the true family of faith and who is not the family of faith. Look at what chapter 6, verse 1 says. What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? Certainly not. How shall we who are dead to sin? And I want to make a point here. When I read, we who died to sin, the Lord himself told me, do you understand what is to be dead to sin? Yes, I'm dead to sin. But do you understand that? Before, you were alive in sin. And he would call out my name. He would say, before, Jose Luis, you were alive to sin. But when I gave my life on the cross of Calvary, I placed you dead to sin. Therefore, you are impeccable. You cannot be called a sinner because you are dead. So the Lord will share with me, Jose Luis, if you are dead to sin, you can't lose your salvation. Because to lose your salvation, you have to be found in sin. But if I placed you dead to sin, then you cannot be found in sin. You are impeccable. Now, when have you heard teachings like this in history? Don't you see that all ministries, even those that profess to teach grace, they see you alive in sin? They say, oh no, yes, we are blessed, brethren. We believe what you teach, predestined and all, but if you are found in sin, you'll be lost. So then they have not understood the message. Because how can you be found in sin if you are dead to sin? If you think that you can still sin and that you can be found in sin and that God is upset with you because you're in sin, then you're not of the family of faith. But if you understand that you are dead to sin, that the church, the family of faith, that Christ died with the purpose of positioning her dead to sin so that sin never touches her again, then you are a part of the family of faith. That is the message. If sin cannot abound over me, you have to say, neither can it abound in me. So you cannot be found in sin. Go tell that to the pastor you visited before. Go tell that to the leaders from all these denominations that are listening to me right now. Go share it with them. Let them believe these 15 minutes I've spoken thus far. If they were to believe this, their kiosks would be destroyed, because all of their doctrines are found in that there is sin in the church. They have blasphemed and have considered the blood of the covenant uncleansed. I tell them and warn them that are listening to me right now that That church you have, that precious church with that choir that sings beautifully, they have blasphemed and have had as uncleansed the blood of the covenant. That is the blaspheme they have done against the Holy Spirit, not having believed that sin has been removed and continuing to preach to the church as if they were sinners. Verse 5, for if we have become united in the likeness of his death, certainly also we will be in the resurrection. Knowing this you must know. If you don't know this, knowing this, that our old man is going to be crucified, was crucified, it's taken place already, was crucified together with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, so we should no longer serve in sin. For he who has died, how many have died here? He who has died has been what? Has been justified from sin. Do you understand the word justified? That you are guilty, but the judge says you've been justified. Someone has been let free. He who has died has been justified from sin. My problem was, brethren, that when I begun to understand this, clearly I used to take trips to Atlanta where we had our headquarters, because I used to work in Puerto Rico as an assistant evangelist. And my calling was to reach everyone in the island, but I have to report monthly in Atlanta to be updated with the new things of the Department of Evangelism, new inventions, explosive evangelism, new ways to reach people. So I had to go there. So then, one day, a great theologian who was the one who would write the expositors of the Sunday school teachings that were given quarterly, a well-known man. Well, then, upon my arrival from Puerto Rico, he came close to me and said in a broken Spanish, "Buenos días." Good morning. How are you? ¿Cómo estás? How is the island of Puerto Rico? ¿Cómo está la isla de Puerto Rico? Well, it's well. So we sat down, we were drinking coffee during a recess that took place. So then, I don't know how we got to, well, I know how we got to this, because I always lead people in these subjects in a decent way and wisely, in a form of a question. Since he's the theologian, I don't have a degree in theology, nor do I want one. Nor do I want one. Thank God I never received one. But I told him, Doctor, what do you understand by Romans 6 that it says we are dead to sin? Well, that is the great theology of the Apostle Paul, that we are dead to sin. But what do you understand by that? And he says, what do you understand? Well, I understand that if I am dead to sin, I'm without sin. I cannot be found in sin. But then he said, where did you study? No, I don't want to talk about where I studied, because imagine when I wanted to study, the Lord took me out of that seminary. If I were to tell him where I got this from, imagine. So then I shared with him and I said, listen, what I'm trying to say is that if I am dead to sin, I gave him an example. It's like an individual that died, that he can no longer be taxed. Where did you learn that? If I were to tell him that I learned it from the one he serves, he's serving Jesus Christ, right? So the one he serves was the one who taught it to me. But if I were to tell him it was Jesus Christ, he would call me a blasphemer. He's not going to believe it. The doctor did not understand what you have understood in the last 20 minutes I've spoken, and he still does not. That is why, perhaps if you knew what you learned sitting in the chairs of this building, it has such a powerful value, because there is no Christian group, there is no theologian or worldwide movement in 2,000 years that can stand against what you teach once you expose of these teachings. There isn't. Imagine I am talking to you about treasures that if you were to know them, you convert into a very special person on the face of the earth. You're a very special person. So then the church was justified from sin. That's why it's called a family of faith, because in faith, she believes what Christ did for her, for the church. So then the Lord taught me Romans 7. That conversation took like 2.5 hours. We were prepared for 2.5 hours. We'll be leaving here at 12 a.m. Redeemed the time. But you know how many times he repeated this? 8 to 12 times. I know I was tired that when he would say, well, let's go back to Romans chapter 6, verse 1. So then I would say, wow, I hope he doesn't continue teaching me the same thing, because I've already learned it, but he would repeat it, and I was already afraid, because don't you see that was a vision? It's like when you have a nightmare that you want to stop and wake up from it, and it continues to repeat itself, and you look for a way out. I want to get out of this, and it repeats and repeats itself. That's what happened to me with this chapter. I would hope that all nightmares were as good as this, nightmares with the Lord teaching you the gospel. But I didn't want to continue hearing it anymore. So when he repeated to me 8 to 14 times, now he says, let's go to Romans 11. I said, wow, this continues. It was such a reality, the way I'm speaking to you now. Romans 7, look at what he read. But now we have been released from the law, having died to that which we were bound, in order for us to serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. The Lord would continue explaining, listen, Jose Luis, the reason why you are, when I gave my life and placed you dead to sin, so when I place you dead to sin, you've died to the law. The law cannot with you, the law of Moses, commandments, no law can come against you. Now notice, the law exists for all of those that know nothing about what am I speaking about. Because there are still people keeping the law. The Jews keep the law. When I was returning here from the radio station, there is a messianic group that isn't anything other than a tangled legalist system that don't understand covenant, speaking that God has placed them there so that we can return to the saving teachings of the Israelites. And that's why you must live holy, because if Joshua Mashiach finds you in sin, look, it is to say they didn't understand anything about the gospel, but they're called Christian Jews, Messianic Jews. That is nonsense and very confused group. Worse than the prior. And people continue to be confused, but they continue to grow. Don't you see that they're looking as sheep for the shepherd, looking for the newest thing out there? Like people that follow artists always looking for the latest CD, because this gets old. We must look for what's new, because artists go up and down. But this that I am teaching you never comes down, because this is the truth of the gospel. You were predestined to hear this word. So it says here, for dying to the law, you've been released from it. So you are free from sin, having died to the law. When Jesus died, he gave you that privilege. And the last thing he taught me was chapter 8. With these 3 chapters, I started this ministry. And I was about 4 years preaching these 3 chapters, because I knew nothing else about the Bible after the fact. After so many years, I would not dare to read another chapter. When I understood Romans 6, 7, and 8, then I didn't dare preach about nothing else until he doesn't explain everything else. I will not touch it. Don't you see that it was contaminated with the previous teachings. I had to renew all my teachings. I broke everything. I threw everything out. All the old, throw that junk out. That's all contaminated. Books that I would go by at the bookstore, and I would find those tremendous covers with golden letters. Profoundness of Christianity. And they were not even in the shore. What profoundness. Books that had as a title, Springs in the Desert, and there were mirages in the desert. Mirages in the desert that you go running thinking there's water and you crash into the sand. You know what I'm talking about. Springs for the preachers. Sermons for the preacher of the new millennium. Tremendous book covers. That every other money I would come to, I would buy them and I would put them in my bookshelf, and I would feel important when somebody would visit me. This man studies garbage. You know what Paul called it? Manure. Paul said, I have everything as manure, garbage, to gain grace, this knowledge, Christ. Well, I begun anew with Romans 7, 8, and 9. And look what I learned from Romans chapter 8 and verse 2. For the law of the Spirit of life, this is not the law of Moses. This is the law of the Spirit of life. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made me free from the law of sin and death. And you know what the Lord will share with me? Hallelujah. It isn't that he's going to free you. That's why when we teach something like this, we have you repeat. Is he going to free you? No, he's freed you, and we have you repeat it because the Lord did that to me. It is to say we are tracing the Lord in that. He shared with me, Hallelujah. It isn't that he's going to free you, it's that he's freed you. What did he free you from? He freed you from the law of sin and death. It says, for what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as an offering for sin, he condemned sin in his flesh. In what? In the flesh. It is to say, the law of the Spirit of life condemned sin in your flesh. And I remember the examples I used to give back in the day, many years ago. I would share, brothers, look, a person that misbehaves in society and commits a crime, he can be caught and they can give him a death sentence. But now, rather than giving him a death sentence, they condemn him instead of killing him. Condemn him to life in prison, right? So what happens? If we kill him, everything ends there. But if we condemn him and leave him a life in prison, he suffers more, counting the days in prison. So my example was, listen, sin exists, to put it in that way, because we have a body of sin. This body is a body of sin. But sin is in our bodies, but we were vaccinated with a vaccine that cancels it out, and you don't see the effects. It wants to do harm to us, but since Christ is in us, he's simply imprisoned, condemned in our flesh. He's condemned. And sometimes it frightens you, and you become afraid, because Paul called it the deceitful desires of the flesh. In other words, that you are perfect, but in the same way, you live in a body of weakness. So the system these days, since they know you have those two there, but he doesn't know that sin was condemned. He says, sin, if God finds you in sin, you'll lose your salvation. You'll be burned in hell. But they don't know that it's condemned. So they're trying with a criminal that's in prison, but they lock the doors of their house thinking he's going to arrive tonight. He's condemned. And if from the prison, Sing Sing prison, the prison you could not escape from, because if you were to escape, it was surrounded by sharks. So when they would imprison you there, they would take the key, might as well. They would throw it in the ocean, as if to say, why put it away if you're never leaving here? Well, this jail, the Lord fabricated it for the sin. It's a light tribulation until one day this body of corruption will be dressed into a body of incorruption, and the fight will be over with the deceitful desires and all of the weaknesses that haunt us. Everything that takes place here on this earth that saddens you and causes you problems will be done away with. The victory is ours because you are dead to sin. Say with me, the family of faith is dead to sin. It's no longer in sin because sin was removed from our midst. That is why we understand this better now, Colossians 2:11. And with this, we'll finish. Colossians chapter 2, it says, in him also you were circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. What did he do with your sinful body? What did he do? He put it off. You know what the problem is? That you have to have faith to believe that he put it off when you still see it alive with you. That is why it is the family of faith, because the family of faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Now, you don't see that it was put off, but here the apostle says that in the circumcision of Christ, your body of flesh, what registered sin, no longer records it, because it was cast out in the circumcision of Christ. This is one of the most beautiful messages that I have preached. This message tonight, the message of most value, because these are the pillars of true Christianity. Any other message that you hear that violates the principles that I have preached tonight constitutes an apostasy, a heresy, and a false gospel. So, to the world that's listening to me via internet, blessed pastor, reverend, doctor, anyone listening to me, I recommend that you hear these words that can save your life, the life of your family, and the church you are pastoring. Consider what we've taught. Look at the biblical verses, and it can bring great blessings to your lives. And to all of us that are here listening, well, I received that these words, you registered them. Take notes, take the CD, hear them again till you understand its significance. And from there, you will enter a new glory. From there, you will be healed from pain and anything that can be affecting your life and can be affecting your life on a daily basis for not knowing the truth. Because notice, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. If it isn't the truth, what you have in your mind, then you cannot live in freedom. So I love you very much. I love you. A kiss to all of the nations that are listening to me at this hour. Blessed with every spiritual blessing, and the family of faith continues to stand, and we continue to grow. Any other message that you hear that violates the principles that I have preached tonight constitutes itself an apostasy, a heresy, and a false gospel. Let's stand. Give the Lord a great round of applause and greet your brother.